Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Giovanna Casimiro, and she's one of the co-founders of Metaverse Talks. In this episode, we talk about how AR and VR is going on in the fashion industry. We talk about XR in general. We talk about our opinions on the current world affairs that have been going on from lots of different controversial topics. I'll just put it that way. And if you want to listen, just tune on in, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. I always find that really awkward when somebody's like, and welcome to the show. Like when they're sat right there, I always find that really awkward. And they just sat there like.
Because you kind of feel flattered in an awkward way, that you feel like, okay.
Yeah, or if I say something wrong, you're there like, yeah, he got that wrong. And that's just like really awkward. So that I actually do the recording of like the introduction after the podcast. And then I can do it like wrong 3 or 4 times. And then you never have to know that I did it wrong. And nobody else has to know I did it wrong. Only I get to see that it's wrong on the recording when I watch it back.
Right, that you could not say my name. I remember that I was in a Netflix show, was a BBC show, and the host could not say my name. She just could not. And when she was able to say like 50% of my name, I said, like, that's great. I said, that we can go with that.
So then how would, let's say if somebody was going to say your name, not that I'm going to, but if somebody had to pronounce your name, how would they pronounce it?
I think the right way is Giovanna Graziosi Casimiro. And people get stuck into the graziosi. I think it's very difficult. They say graziole, grazivole, or they call me Giovanni, which is a very other common mistake.
I was going to say, I think I'm just going to say Giovanna. I think that's like the easiest way to say it, right?
Or Gigi. Or Gigi.
Gigi is even better. Gigi is way better. Actually, because for English people, we find it hard to pronounce anything that isn't like the Queen's English. And then we just sound like, if we try and say anything Spanish, it just sounds so silly. It's Spanish, Portuguese, it just sounds ridiculous. Like, we won't even get into that. But let's talk about you a little bit then. So how did you get into XR? Like, that is the one question that keeps coming back to me, is like, I see a lot of people in the industry and I can understand a little bit about their background and where they come from and everything. But I always like to find out a little bit of, why did you get into XR and technology, and where did that first kind of interest come from?
That interest started because of my bachelor. I studied digital arts, virtual reality, augmented reality were part of my object of study from the first moment I stepped into university in 2009. So it started in the field of arts. I was in a research lab that was focused on immersive technologies, but very underground. I think the studies I had in the beginning were a lot to do with how artists were experimenting with immersive caves and interactive installations. And when I started to research augmented reality and virtual reality, it was fascinating to me. And then the reason why it triggered me in a way that I think no other technology did is because I started really thinking about physics, nothing to do with arts or with the XR technology itself. I felt like, well, this is a simulation of potential realities we do not see. And the idea of multiple realities and parallel universes and you being able to add layers of that, it's an interesting way for us to simulate something we do not understand, especially for augmented reality. And then I kind of specialized on that, although it started way more in the creative space than in the tech space. Then, you start researching and started testing, started really deepening my research on that, and also doing a lot of practice using those technologies. That's how eventually I became an expert.
And you mentioned about like alternative realities, which is one of my favorite topics to actually talk about after a few drinks sometimes. That is like, okay, here's a question for you. Do you believe, this is something I always like to ask, do you believe that we're already in a simulation? Have you heard of simulation theory?
Yeah. Even like the idea of matrix. Sometimes I do feel that we are in a simulation because I feel almost like that I said something and then I met that person, or I felt something, and the next day that happened, and I feel like, bro, the engineer of this whole simulation, it's just tricking me, right? That I said the name of a friend, and then friend sent me a message after 20 years on Instagram. But I also feel that it may be beyond that, you know. Maybe we do have multiple realities that may be connected, and we just have access to one because we can only be in one frequency in our brain. And maybe the other possibilities and potential realities interfere in each other. So I am half convinced about simulation. I think there may be other reasons why those crazy things happen. I'm not 100% convinced yet about the simulation.
Yeah, I love that on the frequencies, because that's what they
Yes,
think that psychedelics and like different types of psychedelics open up a different frequency in the brain, so you can actually see things as if they actually are, or we actually see things. Our current way of seeing things is so one line, and then when you take psilocybin or you take mushrooms or whatever psychedelic drug it is, it opens you up to a completely different place. Yeah, that's always an interesting thing to talk
it's
about.
a great
Have you ever
topic.
thought about what that actually is? Because like the neuroscientists have like a theory on it, but there's still not really like a concrete answer on like what psychedelics are actually doing.
Well, I am a big fan of psychedelics. Also, I have friends who really, well, you can imagine I came from the field of art. So psychedelics, I think, is the thing that artists have been exploring for a long time. I never tried much. I was just talking about that with my mother, who is a homeopath. She's all like, you know, mist of Avalon at home. And then we're discussing about psychedelics. And I really do believe that they may unlock certain sensibilities in our brain that we may not be able to do alone. And I don't know if this is a physical reason that our brain cannot access those frequencies, or if we just learn to block a lot of things through our lives. I think we also are not stimulated when we are kids to really fully feel the world, right? I think there are a lot of social constraints, cultural constraints, and we live in those boxes. But I do believe we do not know the power of our brains, and I don't think it's a mystic thing. I think it's not mysticism. I think it's more about really using the machine right, and we may not really know how to press all the buttons. So I'm really interested. I watch a lot of documentaries. I want to see how these researchers will go, because we do have physicists and like great scientists that said that when I use psychedelic, I felt that I could see things way beyond my own capability and understanding. So maybe we can tune. It's like a radio, I feel. You know, you can maybe tune to frequencies you may not be able to tune before, and then you can listen to new stations. And I think that gotta be incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think psychedelics are super interesting. One on a personal aspect, if you ever do them. I really think it is something that most people, not everybody, but most people should try at least once in their lives,
Mm.
because it does change the way you view things. Because the things you see on psychedelics, you can't really explain and to anybody on how it makes you feel, what you see. Like you can try and explain it, but it just never really does it justice. So I think it is something that most people should try, as long as you're not like a super big control freak. Then
Mhm.
if you're a super big control freak, I normally tell people to stay away, because your first instinct when things go out of your control is to try and grab back the control. But if you're in a trip, it's already too late, and then that's when people have like panic attacks and they have a bad trip. You've kind
Oh,
of just got to
really?
go with it and hope for the best and just try and enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that you really just have to let it take you to the place it should take you. And what I really like also is that there is a connection too with a lot of indigenous practices, right? I think here in South America, because I'm visiting, I think it's interesting to mention there is ayahuasca, which is it's a practice from the indigenous communities in the region of Amazon, the Andes, and it is a super psychedelic trip. And it became a practice for them. When I went to Peru, families would say, "Oh, we do once a month." You know, it becomes almost a way for you to detox your perception. And maybe that's what we're missing, right? In a world full of stimulation and screens and information, we forget to see what is not obviously in front of us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And everybody that I've spoken to who's taken ayahuasca, I haven't actually yet done it, but definitely intend to do it once in my life.
You should.
They always have the same sort of feeling that, and I feel most people that take psilocybin as well, that they feel that everything is alive. Like if you look at the ground, it looks like it's breathing. If you look at trees, you can kind of, this sounds super, like if people haven't done it, they're like, God, this guy's a loser. What's he talking about? But honestly, it's like, this sounds so weird, but it feels like everything has a pulse, everything has a breath, everything is moving in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be the frequency that you're right, that we're not seeing, but it kind of opens it up to a new level of looking at things.
Totally.
It's super
super
cool.
cool. And I think it connects us more with the things we don't understand. And maybe that's why indigenous people, they see nature in a different way. They see nature alive, because probably we just look at trees, we don't even think about it, right? Yeah, it's a tree. And if you see the tree moving in a way that we relate to life, to heartbeating, maybe we'll be more careful the way we treat what is not human.
Yeah. And a part of me, the conspiracy theorist inside me, likes or thinks that this is why it was banned by the government, because of the way it alters
Probably.
our way of thinking. And, that's just a conspiracy theory that I like to think about sometimes. Anyway,
Yeah.
I feel like you had an opinion on that.
I totally have an opinion on that. I think that government controls a lot of things that are supposed to set us free, and set us free intellectually, emotionally. And this is why we're trapped in this ultra capitalist, consumerist society, because that really ties us up. And also, the industry of fear is how the government operates. So imagine that if you feel the nature around you and you feel connected with it and you feel empowered with it, why would you feel afraid? Right? You would understand that there's something stronger than just you going to the supermarket. But then we live in this tiny reality that is all controlled by humans, and humans trying to make deals and trading and making wars. And then you feel very vulnerable because you're in somebody else's hands. So definitely, I think you're not that wrong. And I don't think ayahuasca or any psychedelic drugs are the only thing that government is controlling. I think there's
Yeah,
much more.
absolutely. I totally agree. And I think, in terms of control, I think the one problem I have with control is that it's normally covered in a blanket of safety. Like that's the one thing that really like triggers me, is when they weaponize something like it's to keep you safe. It's because you don't know how to do it, or they weaponize it by, like, it's basically virtue signaling safety in some shape or form, and that's how they get away with it. And that's how, because that's one thing that not many people will argue against. If you go, it's to keep you safe, there's like, you don't really have an argument back to that. And I think that's like a silver bullet that they can sometimes shoot, that nobody has. Well, you can't really have a rational argument against that.
Yeah, you can't. And I think it has been happening forever, right? If you look back into the Middle Ages, also you have the kingdoms. And I don't think people love the kings or their lord. And they were paying a lot of taxes to that individual. But the idea was, oh, he's going to protect me. So I also feel that we need to grow up of this naive thought that somebody else is going to protect you. Nobody protected me when a criminal entered my grandma's house, And I think that in some point we need to understand that there's some battles that we can create. This for me is totally a simulation in our brains that we believe we're safe. We're not safe. The safety is in our attitude towards the world and living in community, not under a government necessarily. I think trusting each other is more important than believing that, I don't know, a prime minister is going to save my house. He's not going to save your house.
No, that's the thing. And I agree. And people think, I think people think that the government is, maybe not everyone thinks this, but I think that people think that they think the government is out there to like help them, and the government's going to look after them. But if you just have to look back, not even that far through history, that the government isn't there to look after you, really. Like that's, I don't really feel like that's their role. Or maybe they try and pretend it's their role, but I would say that history proves that they're not the best at doing that.
I think that they may have intentions, but I agree. I think at the end of the day, um, first of all, it's difficult to be government also, right? Because it's too much to manage. And this is why I think we are living this democratic crisis, because not even the government represents the majority, because it's so fragmented and bipolarized the world today that the government just represents 50% of that cake. And even then do a bad job by they do a bad job in maybe representing and keeping people safe. But the government is not there to make what you want. They will make tough decisions, and not always those decisions will be safe for you. And we can give as an example, like the decision of the French government of removing hijab. I understand where it came from, and they are free to do whatever they want. But it's not just that, there are other complications. They're going to stop every religion from representing everything. My dad from wearing a cross, like, then you should. And not always government is so unbiased. I think non-biases are complicated in the politics. They pretend they are, but they are not. They have biases.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to underplay how hard a role it would be to basically keep everything running in a semi-organized fashion without these wild apes that we kind of still are, and like going crazy. Do you know what I mean? Though I sometimes, I think it's underplayed as well a little bit about how much of a hard job it is to keep civilization actually just ticking along. And that's actually something that I think we all take for granted a little bit, is that
That's
we
true.
actually take living and all the things that we currently have for such granted. Like, it wasn't even that long ago we were like, crawling around on the floor basically trying to build huts, and now look at us. If my internet isn't working for 30 minutes, I'm fuming and calling up somebody to come and fix it. And I think that that's just a
Totally
strange
true.
thing that we take for granted now. And well, the government has a hard job, that's for sure. They definitely do.
It
It's
is.
not
We, we
it's not
need to have
easy.
empathy. It's not easy. I think we need to be understanding, and there may be other new governances in the future. I just feel that we need to delegate less and take more accountability on the things we do as individuals, as communities. Not everything needs to be delegated to the state. The state can be there to support, but can be the only one to take action, right?
Yeah. And it comes down to the individual. And that's something that, well, people feel very small sometimes and think that, oh, well, what can I do? I'm just one person on this giant rock floating around in the infinite amounts of space around us. Like, what can I possibly do to change the world? But yeah, it is a bit of a difficult one, because I have this argument with people about like climate change and global warming and things like that. And on one part, I really like, I am a climate activist in some ways. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I will actively try not to buy plastic for one example. But at the same time, I'm fully aware that no matter what I do on a personal level, it's not going to change the fact that, some other countries like China or somewhere, if they don't clean up their act first, it doesn't even matter what the Netherlands does. It doesn't matter what the UK does, because there's such a, it's kind of I'm playing devil advocate to my own question, really, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very minute unless the big boys actually come along for the ride as well, is basically what I'm saying.
Totally. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that it's very difficult for us to take this into a micro level because the problem is in a macro level, right? So it's very, very difficult. But I think that people need to start taking some responsibility, although I agree with you. I think that, see, environment is another complicated topic, although I think I'm super pro and activist and we have to be mindful. But I think also there's a lot of conversations that sometimes deviate the focus. For example, I did recently an interview with a group of researchers in London College of Arts, and they are researchers, postdoc researchers in new materials for fashion. And they also research the new consumer behavior. And they were talking that, all this conversation of new fabrics, like sustainable fabrics, they don't solve the problem. The only way to solve the problem is to stop buying. But we don't want to stop buying. So we're going to say, oh no, but it's great ESG conversation. Just buy this biodegradable leather. Listen, if you just keep the jacket that you have from 1995, it's better than you buying this new leather that is going to become a mushroom. Who knows? So I think that this is where we also have to be very smart, that not everything out there that is being said to us means the real solution, because there's always an interest behind it.
Yeah.
Somebody's always trying to sell you something.
Yeah. I totally agree. It's the same with like the electric cars, right? Like,
yes,
yes. I'm not going to try. I'm not like. Well, we could go really deep into that, but it's the same thing, you know. Like, it doesn't solve. It basically just puts a plaster or a band-aid over the shit situation, and it's kind of a little bit better. But then, if you really dig into it, and where they actually get like where the lithium ion comes from, and all the other things that come from that, and it's still a massive pool of shit, really. Like, there's no way, there's no two ways about it. There's no two ways about it. It's a difficult situation, but as long as people realize that they do have a choice, I think is like the first thing. Like, you choose what you buy, right? You choose to buy that piece of plastic. You choose to buy that clothing, and we can change things by where we put our money. And that's the thing. Like, people underestimate that their money that goes into the market basically justifies what happens next. You know, that's where we do have control.
And I know that we have been talking about so many topics, but I have to say one thing, and this may sound very anarchist, which I'm a little bit hard, if not a lot. The thing is, people don't realize that, if you just don't pay taxes, I'm not saying people should not pay taxes, but think about it. People complain, the government is doing something I don't want, they're sending money somewhere else, they're making guns, they're exploiting other countries. Don't pay taxes. Do you think the government is going to arrest 300 million people, 5 million people? What they can do? See, the thing is that constrain the power they have. The power they have is representing you with your money, and that's how they trade, and that's how they do things. So we have to understand that even in a public level, you have the power by constraining the money. But then, of course, we feel afraid because there's this whole ecosystem where if I don't pay taxes, I'm going to be arrested. Okay, they're going to arrest 300 million people. In Brazil today, everybody is upset with the government, and they just say, we're not going to pay taxes. What they're going to do? Put the whole country in jail? They can't do anything.
I'm trying to think. I heard a story about this. I don't know if it was in the UK. I don't know if it was in. I have a Brazilian guy that I work with, and I think he was telling me. I think he was telling me about a story where this happened, where there was, I don't know if it's to do with parking or something like that, but anyway, there was some sort of fine, and they fined 10,000 people for something. And they basically all got together and said, we're not paying. Like, every single one of them, there was like this big group, and they just said, we're not paying it. What are you going to do? And they ended up having to like cancel all the fines and end up costing the government more money. And that's like a perfect situation. But I do agree that could be the case. But the repercussions of something like that on
I know, not saying people should do it. Please don't do it. But I'm just saying, we don't even think about it.
Do it. But yeah, I like the position, and to be honest with you, in a simulation, I would love to see how that plays out. I really would, but I'm not sure if I'd like to live it. I'm not sure I'd like to live through it.
I think it's gonna be like Rolf, break the internet, pixels will start falling on our hands and say, what is happening?
We've broken the matrix.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your background then. So talk to me a little bit about your PhD. So first of all, why did you do a PhD? Because they take forever. And what was the what was the PhD in?
So I took the PhD. I dedicated my life 10 years to academics. And I think that was a natural course because when I started the degree in arts and I really pivoted into research lab in digital arts, and I was very much into MIT, what MIT is doing, what, big universities are researching in tech, then you really start thinking about maybe I should just work with research and be a professor. So it was really subsequent. I just did my master's in also how XR is applied to museums and art galleries as a medium of exhibition. And then I said, no, now I have to do the PhD because it's almost like you already did your master's. You're already in the rhythm. You already know the professors. You already can, you know how to apply for the programs. And then I said, I'm just going to do it. And then my PhD was more political. I like to say that because it was not just to agree and do a research on the state of art of technology for memory, because my main core topic was open source technologies for digital memory and heritage. So how can we open the discussion of deciding what is a memory, what is a memorial, what should be remembered in the public space using open source technology? And that is a more of a political discussion than a tech discussion. But then I did a big research on solutions that exist today. Some are from big companies, and I started questioning, like, are those solutions really a tool for citizens empowerment, or this is just another product that is capitalizing on the heritage and on the culture and making it a product over and over again? Like, why we don't have monuments of African Americans? And then at the same time, in 2018, we were living that moment where everybody was attacking monuments. Do you remember that? People were taking all the colonial monuments were being attacked, and I said I got to incorporate that because this shows the crisis I'm pointing towards, that those individuals, they may have been great in the context of their own lives for the values of that society, but today they are absolutely detached from what we consider a hero. But they have a monument, and nobody is willing to re-understand it or explain it. So in the end, my PhD thesis was called Open Source Heritage, and then it presents some pre-existing tools that are already focusing on heritage, digitization of heritage and memory, but then presents this whole context of issues and how the open source community and the crypto anarchy that eventually was the basis for the whole blockchain community find interesting solutions. Somebody curated that this guy should be on the streets as a monument. It's more of a community decision.
Yeah. And that's actually really interesting. I completely forgot about that situation where people were pulling down monuments in London and all over the world. And at the time, my thought was like, okay, this is weird. First of all, I've never felt that passionate about anything in my life. Like I can't think of anything in my life where I've wanted to I'm not really I'm not a protester. I'm not really one to do any of that stuff. But I've never really found a cause that I've been so passionate that I would take to the streets. Maybe actually the only thing that people know about me is probably when the whole COVID stuff was going on and they were mandating vaccines. That's probably the only time I ever thought in my life I would probably protest, because I was just really against that. And that's just my own opinion. People still debate me on that today, but we won't go into that right now. But like when I saw that happening with the things, I was thinking like, okay, we built these monuments, and yes, some of these people may have traded slaves, owned slaves, whatever it is, or whatever they did in the past. And that was obviously at the time an accepted thing. But now we have them still in our cities, and they're kind of, not idolized, but people come and take pictures next to them, and it's like we're idolizing them still. And it is a weird thing to do if you think about it, because morally, we know that we shouldn't have done that, but we did it. But then what, do we just rip down every monument of anybody that's ever done anything bad? Like where do you draw the line on that? That was my question. Like, where do you draw the line? Like, because, Henry Ford, for example, it was one of the greatest people to ever bring us, cars, for example, and completely basically changed the world. But he also supplied cars to Hitler. It's like, do we just completely erase him from the history books because he was selling cars to Hitler? And like, I don't know, where do you think we draw the line?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say that this is a big question because when I was doing my PhD, my advisor, she's from the history field, right? So as a historian, and so what I'm trying to say that I took a lot of that mindset to analyze the situation. As a historian, we have to remember that the monuments, they are a piece of history. So we cannot just say, okay, let's just destroy it. I am not in favor of that. That is the same way that you go to Chichen Itza in Mexico. They're also killing people, right? Within their own context, but we want to keep that story alive to know about it. I think that we have to find ways to replace those narratives in the city, but not destroy the historical piece, right? In a way. So that is, I think, a big dilemma, because yes, should we destroy this monument? Of course not. But should this monument be in the streets? Does it represent the society of today? I feel that sometimes a layer of information, if we could contextualize that monument a little bit better, explaining that this guy is here, not necessarily because he was a good guy, but he brought, I don't know, a lot of innovation at his time, or he achieved great things. You need to contextualize things. So then at least, you know, this is a villain today, but he was not in the past. Because the truth is, when history is happening, you never know if you are in the winner or loser side, right? Ford did not know. He felt that, you know, I think this guy saying something I like, and I'm going to give him cars or whatever. What's the point? So the history is a dynamic object, and it is changing all the time. You don't know who's going to win and who's going to lose. And again, even who wins and who loses, we always say that, right? That the history is told by the winners, and all winning stories, they are biased too. We have to always remember that. So this is why I think there is a huge complex conversation about monuments, and suddenly people started feeling very upset, and I totally had fun. I will not lie. I had fun because people were creative. They were painting the monuments. They were covering their heads like they were hostages with plastic bags. And I was like, that's quite creative. But I think that the only solution is or to take monuments or have to be radical and say no, like no monuments that are making homage to individuals ever again, you know. And then you only have like abstract art in the city, and if you want to create a mausoleum of incredible people, you make a museum of it, you know. Like in Futurama, the Futurama cartoon, that had the heads of old presidents, and then you go there and you find all of them. Or we have to learn to like keep those objects in the city, but then give a layer of information. That was, for example, where augmented reality for me was so important, because you could create a permanent layer that explains who was that guy. I will not even say that girl, because probably was a guy. Who was that guy? What he did of good at his time, and what he did bad, and what are the lessons we learned, you know. And I think that this was exactly the potential, how we can maybe not remove it, but add a layer that educate people about that individual, so it doesn't look like we're being, you know, tricked, that we're just there worshiping that man, and that man killed hundreds of thousands of indigenous people. In Brazil, that's very common. Plenty of monuments for men that were just assassinating First Nation. So it's an interesting topic. See, that's why I did a PhD on it.
No, I totally get it. And that's actually, when you were talking about the monuments, that would have been my first thought as well. It's like, okay, let's tell a story. So you can open up your smartphone, you can, use an app, wherever it is, to then give you a story about who this person was, the lessons we'd learned. Because that's the thing, if you just start destroying things, and then history can be forgotten, and then maybe we don't learn in 200 years that this was actually a bad thing that happened, and because we've destroyed all of the evidence, and then it happens again. That is the problem, right? If you destroy one side of history, you can't learn the lessons from it, and that's what history is for. is to learn.
And I think even with monuments, our memory is very short. I think in general, it's a matter of generations. We have 1-2 generations, and people forget. So I think there is a responsibility as that maybe we can leverage those objects that now we hate so much and make something out of it, right? Something that will mean educating people. And I think, and not just the winner's story. It's really, you can fine, just destroy the winner, but explain why, right? So then our kids will understand why.
I totally agree. And people do just have extremely short memories, and that's not to our own fault in some respects. I think, well, it's just because of mental capacity, and with other things coming into the world, we're easily distracted. Like I always use this as an example, controversial topic, but the
Okay.
COVID, for example, like, you know, as soon as things were coming out about COVID, another thing comes up, you know, Putin invading Ukraine. And then literally 2 weeks and everyone's forgotten about COVID. There was all these memes coming out of like, does anybody remember COVID? It was only a month ago that they were telling you you couldn't leave your home, or the only way you could leave your home is to get food or go to a pharmacy, and you had to wear a
Yeah.
mask. And it feels like we've all forgotten about that already because, you know, there's been since then the recent uh, Palestine and
Hamas.
Israel conflict
Yes, yes.
with Hamas, and then obviously the Ukraine and Russia war. And that's no wonder we forget things, you know. And if it's brushed under the table like it was nothing, and everything that bad happened never reaches the mainstream media, and of course we're not going to remember it because nobody's being told about it. And that's a gripe that I have with not people's memories, but just media, actually, just in general.
And I almost feel that the way we are fed into the situations, you know, I think sometimes we forget a lot because those situations they're really connected with the fear. And they're almost like a sequence of traumas that publicly we're exposed to. And we forget traumas. Our brain is made to forget. You go through a trauma, you're not going to remember every single thing. Sometimes people forget 100% the situation, you know, they don't want to remember. And I feel that we are in the industry of fear. There are lots of authors that talk about that, and Michel Foucault is one of my favorites. He talks about this biopolitics of the body. So we have been exposed to those decisions that actually we have no power over, and they make us feel afraid. So it's like one trauma after the other. So first is the COVID. Well, let's not talk the history of all those traumas, but recently we have COVID. And then after COVID, then oh, that's fine. But then we have a new enemy. That enemy is Russia. You know, and Russia is like, again, I'm not going to be in any side. I have nothing to do with that war. I hope for the best. But that is the story people are telling us
Mm-hmm.
and making
Yeah,
us feel afraid that Russia
yeah,
is going to take over Europe because they want
yeah,
everything. They're like moving towards east, west, and
yeah,
then we live in fear. That's the
yeah.
truth.
That's the best way to stir up fear. And then when they want to invest millions upon millions into, you know, Raytheon and all of these different arms companies, then they have a
Yeah.
reason to, because the threat's there. And then nobody's then going to say, actually, why have you spent $1 billion of taxpayers' money on all of these defense contracts? Oh, because have you not watched the news? Putin's trying to take over the world. Why wouldn't we? And it's funny that taxpayer money, like the tax we pay, it's funny, it goes to the government, and then the government then basically gives it back to the corporations, and it's just a cycle. It's just like this big cycle. It's
It's a
like
cycle.
it's crazy.
It's ridiculous. It's a joke. And the thing is that I feel sometimes that we are clowns, right? Because they are doing that like, okay, it's almost they're looking at the mirror and giving the money to themselves. Oh, thank you very much. And then we are trained to believe that's going to make a difference. Not that we're saying that you should not pay taxes, but it's almost that again, we're going back to the same place. And sometimes I imagine just for the fun that is it that all those leaders one day they meet once a year and they say, okay, now we're going to do a rules roulette, bring you Russia again, and we're going to decide who is going to be the villain. And let's see who's going to be villain of this world. And of course,
Yeah.
US is always out of the table.
Yeah,
They're
yeah. The
never on
US
the
is the
table.
one. The US is the guy spinning the bottle, and whoever it lands on, it's like, oh, North Korea, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Lucky King Jong Un, you're going to be in the papers a bit this year. Yeah,
Yes, sometimes it feels like that.
that would be a very funny comedy sketch. Like if Family Guy or South Park or somebody did like a comedy sketch on that, that would be super funny. I would definitely get
That's an
around that.
idea.
Oh dear. Okay, but let's go back to XR. So like, yeah. So then, so when you finish your PhD, like, where was what was the thought then? What was the thought process? Was it okay? Now I want to go and try and implement some of this stuff into different companies. What was kind of the next step?
Even before, the thing is that even when I was already like finishing graduation, although I was doing my master's, I always worked in the field. So I was already putting in practice a lot of those things. A lot of the projects I did that were my own, like my own authorship in creating augmented reality installations in the world. They were pretty much in the end of my master's and mid of my PhD time frame. So from 2016 to 2018, 2019 were the moment where I did a lot of experimentation with independent projects. So I did live in several countries doing augmented reality art installations, guerrilla art, to really try some of my hypotheses, right? So, for example, in 2017, I did a project in Boston that was a facade, interactive facade with augmented reality in a heritage site where you could go back and forth in time. It was a time travel experience. So you could see that house 3 eras ago and also see the future. So this was a way to try a little on how to do storytelling with augmented reality. And then also during that time, I was consulting for companies and keep working with studios that provided VR and AR solutions for corporate. So pretty much when I finished my PhD, I was already working. And then I continue to provide services. But I think, of course, after I concluded the PhD, I had a better understanding about which tools in the open source space, like how we can leverage more open source technology to corporate, right? And even more decentralized technologies to corporate, which is still a big problem because majority prefer to work with tools that, are stamped and safe, like you have safety certificate of safety from Microsoft or Facebook or Google. But it was an interesting way to add those options to the projects I was leading in the studios I was working at the time. Hello, hello.
Is that my Wi-Fi has gone down? Oh, and Gigi is gone.
I am recording. Yeah, but I am in a call and then the internet just dropped. It was working so well. Now suddenly out of the blue, the internet stopped working. Hey, David, sorry. I think there was a problem with the internet because we said too many times don't pay taxes.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you
The
don't pay your
government.
taxes. The
That's what
government are
happened.
listening.
Yes.
Or maybe
In
the
the
government's listening.
simulation.
That's what it is. No
Probably.
worries. All right. Where were we? We were halfway. Well, I think you were talking about
The studios that then I started implementing the open source solutions in the studios. And I think that the PhD really contributed for me to bring those alternatives, I think, to the clients and also to the corporate. Even at that stage, I would say it like the centralized solutions were not a big thing. Now it's more accepted, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And then did you look into the kind of not impact, but how AR and VR is used in like a marketing context? Was that anything that you looked into? Because I feel like that's an area that doesn't really get talked about too much. It's more about, well, the way I see it is gaming with VR. Augmented reality is more like how are we going to replace the 2D phone? But how have you seen like, or how do you think marketing or the marketing industry will be impacted by VR and AR technology?
Actually, my experience was that always the marketing budgets were the one backing up a lot of that experimentation. If it was not R&D budget, I think a lot of the marketing strategy will be around those new technologies. So you may create an augmented reality campaign that you see something somewhere geolocated, or you will have a VR booth in a fair showcasing the product or a simulation of, I don't know, let's imagine you're working with an airline company and then you can actually simulate a Christmas flight with VR in a fair, like a trade show. So I do think that actually marketing is really right now, especially when you think about XR solutions and blockchain, for example, the whole Web3 thing and spatial web, marketing is the big driver, trying things and using its own budget to try and see what works, what doesn't work. And I think after we go through that process, that's when the company starts like, okay, this is a great marketing activation, great PR opportunity. Now, how do I actually implement it longer term in my company's strategy where I can get real ROIs, right? Like I can reach real, like people love those terms, KPIs. How can I reach the KPIs? And how can I get my money back? So marketing is really key in this whole industry. I had a lot of experiences with marketing teams. Most of them were leading some of those experiences.
Yeah. And so you were at Decentraland for what, a year and a half? What was that experience
Yeah,
like?
a little bit more, almost
Yeah.
two. Well, the experience was very good. I think that in the beginning, when I started, it was really the boom of the metaverse conversation. It was 2 months before Facebook made the announcement. So I can imagine, I saw the peak and the downfall also, in which everybody wanted to interview everyone in the metaverse. The metaverse was the future, and then we were able to really communicate with brands, and brands were very open to try, you're open to invest. So during that time, I think like late 2021 and almost whole 2022, things were pretty good. It was an interesting way to see people very motivated in the space. They were trying, especially the community. That's a big deal for me till today. Special people, that started as players, believed in the project, and became entrepreneurs, started to do 3D content. And so it's quite interesting. But I think when the crisis arrived, behavior changed, platform priorities changed, and community also changes, right? Because the opportunity is not there like it was before. That whole creators economy that the Web3 space provides is not there the same way. So I think in the later stages it was more difficult for me to understand what we actually are offering when, like, let's say corporations and brands are not understanding what we do and the platform doesn't really cooperate because the tech is not yet refined enough for companies to feel safe in using that tool on a regular basis. So I think that the end was a moment of realizing that we have to work more in educating those companies, but also refining the tools. The tools are not good enough for mass adoption. And
Yeah.
while they're not good enough for a CEO to enter and see his own beauty in the metaverse, we can really call that the metaverse. It's more like the metaverse is a prototype of its own self. One day it may be a real product. Right now, I think is between a prototype and an MVP. Maybe MVP is a better term.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of people were shocked when the metaverse bubble actually even appeared. I think it was like
Yeah.
if you were in the space, you could see it building a little bit with like the Quest 2 coming out and things like that. That was like a big thing. But then when it really exploded, when Zucks did that really elaborate video where he was like in this 3D world, everyone had this idea of what the metaverse was going to look like, and then in reality it looked like a PlayStation 2 game, and everyone was a bit like, everyone that wasn't in the space was like, what is this shit? Like everyone was just so confused after seeing an unbelievable advertisement of what the metaverse should be to the reality of where it was. And I think I have loads of friends that are like, what, you work in virtual reality? They're like, what? They're like, isn't that like for like kids to play games? Like it's a really interesting dinner conversation, like with my girlfriend's
Totally.
parents for the first time. They're like, virtual reality? Like they're just like, they're so confused. They either think I'm a gamer nerd or like just something like that. And yeah, I think you're right. It's hard for people to understand what it is. What is the return on investment on that? And that is the hardest thing to communicate.
And the value proposition, because even today, like if you talk, majority of the people you talk, if I say, "Oh, I work with digital fashion companies," and they'll say, "What do you mean by digital fashion companies? Why would I buy a clothing for my avatar? Why would I have an avatar?" Like there's so many questions that are super valid because
Yeah.
it's not in the culture yet. Maybe I think alphas and Gen Zs is still in between, but alphas for sure. You don't have to explain to an alpha, the generation alpha, what is the value of buying a garment for your Roblox character. But even for me, like we are millennials and I see the value, but I don't go every day and I obsessively am thinking about my garment in my virtual body. I actually have been a while that I don't enter the metaverse and blockchain as I used to. And the other thing, going a little bit on our memory short, right, that we discussed before, I think that the metaverse is just the reincarnation of things we have been talking for so long. So there was the cyberspace in 1990s and the whole thing about Tron, right, and the grid, and then we stopped talking about it. Our cyberspace is old. There's those 3D ugly museums. We don't want to see that on the internet. Then it became this whole paranoia of the Matrix, and then it just cooled down for a bit and it came back as the Metaverse, which is just the same thing with new features. So there will be a new name. If it's just a matter of a name, 5 years from now there will be a new name. We have to see what that name will be. And people, again, there will be the rise of the neo metaverse, and there will be a new name, better applications. It's just a cycle.
And then Zuckerberg will have to buy a new, or have to change the name of his company again to whatever that verse is called.
Maybe it's gonna be a name that is very like holistic and spiritual, like Pachamama. Who knows if the metaverse called Pachamama? That would be great.
That'd be way more interesting than the metaverse.
I like that.
But let's go back to like the company standpoints then, because I always try and think about it from a CEO level. Like I'm trying to think like trying to convince a CEO to buy like 100 headsets to train 100 people or train thousands of people is really hard, let alone like how do you do that into the fashion industry then? Because that's the way like my scope of the metaverse and VR is very narrow to like virtual reality training and haptics inside virtual reality training. So I don't really know that much about VR other than a few gaming aspects. But then when I hear about fashion in AR and VR, like my initial thought goes to the applications where you can try on clothes, for example. I see that application, but what else is there in fashion that people want to do other than the avatar stuff as well?
Yeah, other than the avatar stuff. There are a couple of things brands have been trying, and I do feel that the fashion world is quite flexible. They have a space for, because in a way it's a field of arts, right? It's creation. So before you even think about manufacturing, you have this whole creative process. And that I think allows designers and their CEOs, if they belong to a bigger holding or corporation, to think how they can interject more technology into that process. But I think that they are adopting in different ways. So I think if you are a designer, you may use digital solutions to prototype. I'm not even thinking about communicating with the public. I'm talking about your own process, right? As a designer, you may be able to use 3D solutions to prototype pieces, to simulate how they behave, even before you have to cut the first time that fabric to stitch a design, right? Also, you can rethink how you're going to do your marketing strategy. Now, if you are a big corporation, I think it's mostly about increasing sales and marketing. So if they want to increase sales, I think the try-on that you just mentioned, the augmented reality, is a way to make people feel more interested in buying a product. And I was checking into data recently that shows that especially millennials and Gen Zs, majority, like 87%, go first into a try-on or a website. We do web research first. And then if you feel compelled, we go to the store. So definitely making this first experience digitally with the product more interesting is going to eventually convert into a bigger revenue stream to a store or to a brand. So that is an important tool. But they also can create attractive content in the stores, right? Because we live the crisis of the physical retail spaces. So can you create something in your store that is extremely interactive or personal, that customize the experience? And I think that's where, for example, virtual reality come into place, holograms come into place, interactive screens come into place, and that can convert into numbers. And marketing, I think there's always a value for marketing. So for example, recently I saw what Macy's did with a platform called Journey. Macy's created this game inside a virtual space, which is off-chain. It's not on the blockchain, but it was really well done. And for someone like Macy's, which I always say in a good way, it's a dinosaur, it's one of those heritage names that have been there forever. Trying something like that, it's really getting out of their comfort zone. And they got a lot of PR. They got 7 billion impressions, if I'm not mistaken. I was talking to their creative director recently, which is a huge number for one company. So you see the return. It's easy to convince a CEO with that number, right? Like maybe you should do something new, like in the same vibe, and we're going to get lots of impressions in a moment they are forgotten by people in a way. The new generation may not be so connected to Macy's or Selfridges. I cannot really speak on behalf, but I know Macy's and Sears in the US, they are fighting to be in the spotlight. So it's a tricky one. Of course, convincing CEOs is never easy, but I think if you show numbers, now we are in a phase where if you have numbers that prove that it drives attention to the brand, or adds value to the revenue stream, is a new revenue stream channel, I think you should be able to implement new ideas like that. I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, I'm on the
Now I am. Okay.
my mute button again. Damn it.
That's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I hate to be that guy in a meeting, and everyone's like, "You're on mute. You're on mute," and I was like,
That's very common. In meetings I go to. So that's
first world problems. But I was saying that, yeah, attention is basically the number one currency at the moment that people can buy into. And whichever way people get it, it doesn't really matter. Like, you see so many influencers nowadays, in my opinion, doing stupid things, things that aren't actually good for the youth, good for people, but that gets them a lot of attention. It brings them a lot of fame. And with attention comes sponsorships, which comes different revenue streams. And in a weird way, I find that really toxic in a way that, yeah, you have to be out there. You have to put yourself out there. And sometimes provocative marketing, in whether it's like a nudity or like just something out there, gets a lot of attention to a brand. But again, it comes back to, we as consumers have a little bit of control of what we click, what we put our money into, that should swing that either way. But do you have an opinion on like provocative marketing and the attention economy?
Oh, totally. I have opinions about everyone, a lot of things, and that's my problem. So the situation I feel is, we live in this era of influencing people, right? The influencer era. And I think some brands could not really keep up with that. So that's the problem. We see individuals being really highlighted in this space and posting things that are absurdly nonsense, and they build their own brands. Like if you look into the Kardashian empire, which now a lot of people are questioning if they're now fall or not, but they were not really a company, right? They were just individuals doing silly things on a TV show, and suddenly now they have makeup brands, and then they have, I don't know, losing weight pill brands, and then the bras that are going to destroy the environment, and so many other things that they created. And that proves that people are not really looking to quality or deepening their knowledge on a good product. Is about the flashlights. It's really about the superficiality. I think that's very concerning. And brands start doing the same thing, right? They start trying to, it's a little bit of a freak show society. We're going back into that idea. Whatever is freaky, we want. So then brands want to work with crazy things and maybe very superficial strategies that sell more now, rather than looking into a longer term relationship with the customers, or a product that is long lasting. But at the same time, I have to say that I think this idea of community in the Web3 space really defeat a little bit of that, because of course we're talking to creating relationships with a community of individuals for a longer term. But that is very small, right? Right now, when you think about brands trying those strategies of co-creating collections, co-creating products with individuals, we're talking about 0.001% is really R&D at this stage. Influencer culture and this idea that the visibility is the trade. I think that because I was raised in the beginning, well, I saw the birth of Facebook, you also, and Instagram. So we saw how it was before and how it is now, and how that's just sickening. How the values change so much, and how that is causing lots of problems, including mental health issues in the new generations, image issues to all of us. And I think we really don't know what is valuable anymore. That's what is complicated. Somebody says, oh, listen, this incredible influencer is launching this makeup line. It gotta be great. Why? Just because she's popular? That doesn't make her a specialist in makeup. It's one thing has nothing to do with the other, So we're losing a little bit our senses of identifying good things, good products, good content. And I think that is and that's part of, right? Because then you just buy because we feel connected to that individual, not because the product is worth the price.
Yeah, it's so funny. I look at some like YouTube, for example, and you see like a mass influencer with a really bad video that does like millions of views, and like just because he's got a following, millions of people look at it, which meant then other people see more people looking at it, which brings more people. But then you could have like somebody that's got, who's just started a YouTube channel, who's delivering like unbelievable information, but he's getting 20 views a video and nobody cares what he's doing because nobody's actually watching it. That is so messed up in a way, right? Like that is like pollution of information from the wrong people is just, I really wish there was a platform that didn't, that the algorithm somehow promoted on quality, not on
like
what
quantity, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I
And
would love.
and we are in this place, I think, that it's like a peacocking society, right? It's about the dance you do, for the mating. It has nothing to do if you're really great in what you do. It's
Yeah.
distract me as much as you want. And this is part of the show business in a way, right? I was watching Elvis movie yesterday, and there's like a snowman, right? It's a trickster in a way that create those illusions. And I think we deserve it because we go for it. We have to really be critical, like who you follow. Again, we said that about the state and the government, right? That the governments, they are supported by us. The same thing about influencers. I think we have to be very critical in choosing who we follow and who we look at, because it's not just following. That's the insanity of it. By just watching a content, even by accident, you already created an analytic. You already created data that the algorithm will say, oh, I'm going to keep showing this person to everyone.
Yeah.
So your watching time is as precious as your bank account. And we don't realize that today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the data economy and everything else. And the one thing I always think about with this kind of stuff is when AI gets to a certain point where it can actually check what everyone's viewing, what everyone likes. And then I'm worried that, like, if an AGI eventually comes out and it's looking at all of the things that it thinks that we value, and it might just decide that, like, actually, no, what are these people doing? This is a load of crap. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's like the Terminator vibe coming out, and then we'll get destroyed. But I don't know. I worry about things like that, and yeah, just what that might mean.
Maybe it would be great to have an AI that put us in place, like put us like do a conscious check, like
Yeah.
seriously that you're watching this, that's not good for you. Although I don't want AI to force me to eat broccoli or or a lettuce, like hey, this, you better watch this. But would be great if there is a system that say, okay, this is for you to get out of what you already know. You know enough of, Kendall Jenner. I don't even know her
Yeah.
name. Kendall. So let's just go with something new, maybe somebody that does similar content but has more consistency or has a better approach. And I hope we get into a point where we reconnect with discoverability. I think there was a term for digital design when you create apps and when you create content, but actually we don't have any discoverability. There's no exploration. It's just you are being fed with the same thing with different faces and different hair colors, and that's it. There is no
Yeah.
discoverability.
I never really thought about it like that. Getting fed information, which is basically what it is. You open up
Yeah.
YouTube, and they have literally got the food on a spoon for you to feed you whatever content they think is going to keep you there for the longest period of time. So then they can make more ad revenue from you. I mean, that's a whole different conversation as well. But okay, let's talk about where do you think the future of the metaverse is going? And like we talked about, like mass adoption, we both agree the technology isn't there at the moment, AR or VR standpoint, in my opinion, especially for the masses. For the nerds amongst us who love it, it's there. But where do you see it going then in like the next 5 years? Like, what is the next big thing in your opinion?
Well, clearly the numbers indicate that one of the big things is gaming. Definitely gaming becoming an instrument of communication of brands, for sure, and corporations. But I'm also believe that we are seeing clearly the beginning of what I have been waiting since 2009, or maybe even from when I was a kid, which is a screenless society. Recently, we saw Humane AI pin, Motorola, the wristband, incredible Power Rangers morph phone, right? And all those tools, they point towards the fact that we may be seeing a shift on the usability, right? We came from Blackberries to touch screen. Our kids already were born, when they're out of the birth, they're already doing this with their hands, right? The babies, they come with this crazy mechanism, they're already like this. So I think that that's going to change. We're going to have to relearn the actual user experience. The user interfaces will change if we start reducing the number of screens around us. And you can also see that with the idea of mixed reality. So all those new glasses, I was looking at one called Nemo, another one called X-Real, which are quite affordable. And they are just this augmented reality glasses that create your computer screens, but in a virtual way. So I think we will start learning. I think in the next 5 years will be about rediscovering the space, that the space around us exists, that the content does not need to be contained in a frame in front of you, but it will be adapted to the way you move, to you being human. So this is a very positive view on what is going to happen, of course. And AI is going to be part of everything we do in a way. So XR is going to be unleashing the metaverse, the virtual worlds, and all of that. Now, there's always a bad side of all of this. I think we have to be very careful about how we incorporate those mobile devices into our bodies, because they are not healthy already as an element that I put on my table or on my pocket. Imagine if there's a pin I'm wearing all the time. It's almost like this ubiquity is never going to decrease. It's just going to increase. It's going to be more invasive. It's going to be almost like an organ. So we have to understand the impact of that in our health, because there's a lot of discussion over the radiation those equipments, devices they have, but also how we're going to behave with that thing all the time on us, or here in our eyes or in our body. So this is one point. And we also have to see how the whole privacy, screen time is going to be when everything is so persistent. When you have screens that don't feel like screens, when you don't have a device that you actually close, this is going to create a blur really between reality and virtuality. And then I think data privacy and mental health will have to be even more in check, because with also AI, things will be like simulation within the simulation will be even more difficult to identify. I think the truth is going to be a very subjective thing in 10 years, maybe not 5. So those are my predictions for now.
Yeah, man, there's so many different places I could go into that. But yeah, I think the one thing I want to touch on is like the mental health aspect of like screens. And do you think that mobile phones are to blame, or is it the applications on the mobile phones? Because I remember like being a kid having a mobile phone, and there was nothing really to do on it except for call people. Like what we have at the moment, like that no longer is a phone. Like what that
No,
is,
no.
this is like we call it a phone or a smartphone, but this is everything.
It's a portal. It's a
Yeah,
portal. It's almost like a Stargate. It's a portal. Before, I also, when I had phone, my first phone, I was 15, and I just played Snake. And I would buy ringtones
yeah.
and put Lady Gaga ringtones for a friend, and they call me. That's the only thing we
Poker
would
face.
do. Exactly, poker face when a friend calls you. And the truth is, I do think that it's a matter. It's not just the way the device operates. I think it's the culture behind the device, and definitely the applications, they prey on us. Although we are all addicted to them, I'm not gonna say that I go to Instagram quite a lot. I'm learning more about TikTok, and it is a game. I think that the fact that it's this very fast reward, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
It is a fast reward. The likes are free reward. You feel boosted. It plays with our ego. I do think that there's a lot of technologies that can be associated to the sins. It's like it's about vanity, it's about greed, it's about, buying a lot. And a lot of those tools, they really play with our most instinctive emotions. And we sometimes put technology in a place of, oh, we're going to be detaching from our humanity. I totally disagree. All the technology we have today is actually enhancing our humanity, because it plays with our deepest feelings, that, oh, I want to be seen, I want to be loved, I want to be important, I want to have power. So I think it's more the engine of those tools than the actual hardware. The hardware is just going to be there to facilitate the access. But I think the intention of those apps and how we design apps, which is another thing that is dying. I think people are tired of apps. Mobile apps are something 2008. Nobody wants to do that anymore. Um, so those are, I think, the evil behind the screen. The screen could just be to, I don't know, take photos and see your parents and your friends and buy ringtones, create ringtones maybe, and that's it.
Yeah, I went on TikTok for the first time probably 3 months ago. You can tell I'm getting old. Like that's the first time I've ever been on it, and I just wanted to see what it was all about. And I was shocked at first of all, what it showed me. I don't know what my data has been telling people, but what they showed me was just I'm not sure if I want to mention it. it was just bizarre, and I wanted just to see. Okay, can I? How, like, what is it all about? So I started scrolling and it's like, oh, crap, rubbish. Okay. Oh, what's this? And it hooks you for a little bit and I'm watching it. And then before I knew it, it was like 20 minutes. And every time I wanted to come off, I still just kept swiping. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, I can now see why my friends are just out like this. Boom, 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 boom. It's crazy.
It is. I think that I had the same feeling. Probably when you start on TikTok, they show you the same free content, maybe. I was shocked. I was like, what is this? It's like you have these people playing with puppets, and then it changes to a woman selling you purses or selling, I don't know, beads for you to do it yourself. And then there's like people doing ASMR, which actually like, but in a crazy way because they're competing with each other. And then you have those scripts that look like avatars. Oh, flowers, corn, right? And it's just, I felt that I was older when I entered. And I was like, I cannot comprehend this communication style. I had to learn about it, but it is a little scary because it feels that we took the entertainment level to a point where a woman would stay 8 hours saying flowers, flowers, ice cream. I don't know if you saw that girl that she stayed 8 hours doing that. People were throwing her whatever those sparks, those fake things, those props that she would be like, ooh, and I was like, Jesus, this is next level.
We're paying this girl to do that as well, right? They're like giving her money to do this. Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were paying because you buy those props and then you give, and they can interact with it, but it's almost like you're paying, like it's a tip.
Yeah.
And she stayed there for 8 hours doing that. And I was like, okay, this is really, if there is a joker, and not, those are professionals and I respect, they are entertainers, but isn't it what it was back in the day in 1300s, 1100s? You had the joker, he would come to the court and then he would just entertain us.
Yeah.
And we'll make fun of him. And this is, I think we see that too in TikTok very clearly. And it is a little bizarre, a little. We have to get used to it.
Yeah, I think somebody told me something interesting, was like, maybe our attention spans haven't got shorter, but think of it like the quality of content the bar is way higher now. That's how he told me to look at it. He's like, maybe our attention spans haven't got shorter. Maybe we've just got higher expectations of what good content is. So that's why we scroll past things super fast. It's not that we have a shorter attention span. It's just like we can instantly judge in probably like half a second whether we're going to like that video or not based on the first second. So that's where people have to up their game on their hook, basically, is what he was trying to say.
And possibly also, this is a result of the fact, and which is a paradox, but we live in a moment where we have a huge amount of content being created, right? And I think you don't have to go to TikTok. You go to Netflix and you just don't find a movie. How many movies they have? So many are bad movies.
I spend more time looking for the movie than I do actually looking at the movie.
Exactly. That's where we need an AI. Just find something, please, that I don't have to think about it. You can just find something good based on what I like. And it's always going to bring one movie, Gladiator. You're going to watch Gladiator forever because you cannot find good movies anymore.
Because movies nowadays are rubbish compared to what they were back in our day.
They are. They're totally rubbish. I mean, you cannot find good movies anymore. And the reason I think is then people say, oh, but people cannot watch movies anymore because they can't stand the screen for 2 hours or 1 hour and a half again seeing another hero flying. But the thing is, while our attention span may have decreased or our criteria increased to detect good information, we created mediums where anyone can build content, and there's so much bad content. So we have to do that sorting, which is also paradoxical. Okay, we don't want to stay a lot on the screen, or we can detect good content, but we can't find it. So it's an endless journey of search, of the unknown. You get there and you have to keep finding. So this is something that I think all the time, like, it's very difficult to find good stuff to watch nowadays. And sometimes you just have to watch half good stuff because you don't have an option, or you have to stay 3 hours there trying, and not succeeding. So it is an industry of frustration, I feel.
Yeah, I swear just all movies I watch nowadays are like politically driven in some way, trying to push, like they're trying to push like some sort of movement on you. Like any Hollywood movie is like, I don't know, I feel like it just has like a narrative to try and make you accept a certain thing. And
Mhm.
I've got the biggest pushback muscle to anybody trying to push me into a certain corner or a certain way of thinking. And I
Totally
just
right.
can't watch modern day movies. They just drive me insane. Like, I can't even remember the last
Yeah,
one I enjoyed. It's just, yeah. But, so yeah, if you got
yeah.
something?
I was just saying, I do the same. I think that most of the movies I watch, they're the new ones, they're biographical, or they have some deep message behind it. But I can't watch hero movies anymore. It's just I can't.
Yeah, me
It,
too.
it's
Batman is about
not
as far as I
possible.
can go. Like Batman, I feel like is the only
Maybe
decent one left. But even that, it's a stretch sometimes. But like the Iron Mans and what are they called? The Avengers or something like that.
Avengers.
Oh my
And
god.
also because I understand that the comics, they have different universes, right? I get it. But then when you put it in movies, you feel like, okay, this is never gonna end, it's gonna be resurrecting characters and bringing them back to life. And this is when sometimes you don't have the closure. I like films that it's sad, like Star Wars. It was good till the sixth episode where there was a closure. Now, I don't know. And
Yeah.
now it's also this whole new thing that you cannot keep up. The story doesn't close. So maybe we are in a society where things don't, there's no closure, right? It's a society where you don't have ends, and that's quite anti real, because everything has an end. We have an end,
Hmm.
and the story should have an end, and
Absolutely.
shape new stories that are unrelated to the previous story, right? So
Absolutely. So
it's
you a Star Wars fan? Like old Star Wars, like Return of the
I,
Jedi kind of?
I am, because my dad is also, so I'm really big fan of the old movies. I actually prefer the old stories. I think the first six are fine, but then
Mhm.
after that, but I'm a very big fan. And also I'm a fan of like old movies in general. I really like movies from 80s and from 90s and even 70s. I
Mhm.
think there was something about, you don't have the tech, so you make magic with the story.
Yeah.
And when you have too much tech, you just keep on the aesthetics, and the aesthetics, they are not enough.
Yeah, I agree. Like one of the things that has been ruined for me recently is like documentaries on animals where they CGI everything. Have you seen this? Like that is one thing I can't.
No.
Oh my gosh! So if you watch any like, I have a really trained eye for CGI. Apparently, I can't unsee it. So if it's like a documentary on like I don't know, marine biology and like things in the ocean, I can't unsee the CGI. So they just CGI dolphins and fish and the bubbles, and it just ruins it for me. It's just like I'm watching a cartoon or something. And I just think like,
Yeah.
can't you just go under there and film and just keep it natural? Like I'd rather just see what it's actually naturally like, not like this enhanced version.
And also, well, it's way more difficult. You have to leave your camera forever under the water, which is the whole thing. You say, oh my God, how they captured this little tiny baby rat fighting a snake in the desert. And they left that camera for 25 days to capture that moment, right? That's what
That's the
we
best part.
believe.
Yeah. That's the best part that I
And
want to see.
exactly, because somebody made an effort to be there.
Yeah.
Now, if you reproduce that tiny baby rat just fighting the snake in a CGI, there's no value. And I think that's what there's no effort, and we're totally desensitized. When we see CGI, it means nothing to us. You say, oh, great scene, action scene, another CGI. We miss, I think, when you think that Star Wars were miniatures, they were shooting the miniatures like this, and then they were trying to make this whole overlapping of layers of physical film with, you know, the visual effect. They were drawing the explosions, the lasers they have. It's funny, they behave like bullets, but they actually are lasers. It's so good,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know. But they have this reaction like they were actually bullets, but they were not, because people didn't know how lasers would work. Like George Lucas was not special on how the laser should behave in a certain way. I think that we lost that magic. You know, that was magical because we were hackers. That was hacking.
yeah.
And today we are so experts that we don't hack anything. It's just so easy.
Yeah, I do agree. All right. Well, we're coming up to the time limit, but so
Okay.
where can people find you? What have you got going on? What is next on your horizon? So you're traveling around a lot at the moment, but what have you got? What's in the diary over the next 3 to 6 months?
So I probably will keep traveling, but I have been focusing a lot on education in some institutes in Europe, especially on the fashion side. But also I do have a project in Latam that is focused on awareness and education called Metaverse Talks, and we have been doing several courses and activities to really bring awareness about what is coming in the future. I'm also working on an augmented reality fashion festival. This is something that is still very confidential, but very soon we're going to release some information about it. I think that's going to be a very cool project that will bring a new light into how fashion can leverage those technologies. And I think I will keep working with a lot of interesting metaverses out there. Quite like different small projects coming up to try new things. I think 2024 is going to be a year to unleash the metaverse for sure, and we have to do that with XR.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, I'm sure we'll speak again soon. Hopefully, when I've got a few more 100,000 viewers, but we'll definitely speak at some point in the future.
Thank you, David, and thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you very much.